Thank you, everybody who's joining in with us for this webinar today. We're very excited to talk about this text, and I'm happy to have with us Mark and Karen McReynolds, who are the authors of this book. And we'll give them a moment in a few moments to talk about their backgrounds. But I want to emphasize or just come back to what Jay just said. This whole textbook series has taken half my adult life almost. And it's a blessing to know that we've completed it by God's grace. He's brought us to this point. So I know a lot of the people who are here are people who have used Novare texts in the past. But we're here today to talk about the brand new one. So let's get into that. I want to just introduce our conversation by talking about how this project came about. Of the 11 texts in the Novare product line, I wrote 6 of them, which means there are 5 that were written by other people. And the interesting thing is how God brings those people to us. In the early times, I didn't even go looking. Earth science and life science and biology teachers came to us, were sent to us, I should say. When it came to environmental science, we did go looking. I knew that to have a good conversation with potential authors, I needed to specify what kind of book we were intending to write. Particularly in this subject area, a lot of people disagree about how things should be treated. So I had a vision for how we were going to treat things. So I wrote up a white paper, you might say, maybe 5 pages long, on the core principles that we were going to be using as we wrote the text. But then to identify an author or reach out and find one, we'd had a notice on our job board at Classical Academic Press for some months, and nobody had applied through that was the right candidate for this. It was actually my wife who suggested that since I knew some people who were administrative people at BioLogos, maybe I should reach out to them and see if they could help. So I wrote an email to them. And they said, sure, we'll send this around. Well, they sent it to the International Conservation or Christian Conservation Organization, known as Rocha International. And an individual there saw the email and said, I think this is Mark McReynolds all over the place. So they forwarded the email to Mark. And within a couple of days, Mark emailed me and said, I'm very interested in writing this text. And I replied with my white paper and said, well, read this and then let's talk. So I sent it to him. And in about 24 hours after he'd read it, he wrote back and he said, okay, now I really want to read this. I really want to write this book. So we were off to a good start because we knew we were all on the same page. In that document, I had mentioned that as we have done with all the Novare Science texts, we have treated science seriously. And by that, I mean mainstream scientific points of view. And in the environmental science world, several of those areas are controversial within the Christian community. They're not so controversial outside the Christian community, but inside the Christian community, they are, particularly in the United States of America. And so I had said that we were going to, pollution is really happening, climate change is really happening, and it's human caused. These things, there was no doubt, really, because of the huge amount of data and the huge consensus. And so that's the position we were going to take. But I said that as we develop the book, I want us to think about two things. One is not pointing fingers at the past and the people who brought this about, but instead cling to two things. One, what do we know? And two, what can we do? So I had mentioned that in this core principles document. And Mark, when he replied, he said, I want to add a third element to the two that you mentioned. What do we know? What can we do? But we can have hope while we're responding to these things. We want to highlight the fact that as believers laboring in the King's garden, his creation, we can have hope in him, and that we can come to this task, both the study of the situation in school as well as our labor, with hope. So I thought that was a beautiful way of getting our conversation going, and as we planned this textbook project. And one person asked me after the book was done, where does hope appear in the text? And I was delighted to say that it appears in many, many places, because there frequently throughout the text, there are discussions of what people can do, lists of tasks or projects or organizations that people can become involved with. And these often get into discussions of about, how are we going to be working as we work? But all of this discussion about hope, it's highlighted in two main places. One is at the end of chapter 2, an entire chapter on creation care. And the other is at the end of the final chapter, which has hope in the title of the chapter, Sustainability and Hope. So the final chapter is about sustainability and sustainable practices. So that includes recycling and a sustainable development and other issues. But then the chapter concludes with a pretty long treatment of where Christians find their hope when we see problems like what we see in our environmental context today. I'm going to mention in a few minutes more of the features that we've included in the book. But before I get to that, I want to give Mark and Karen a chance to talk. And so what fascinated you about this project? What piqued your attention? I know you guys have backgrounds, scientific backgrounds in your research and PhD projects. You have academic backgrounds teaching environmental science. You have theological pastoral background. But tell us about your interest, your passion for this subject, and some of your background that applies.
Yeah. You want to go first? Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was really excited to even think about that kind of thing, although it was a monster project. John said, well, I think I want a chapter, I think it was every 6 weeks. And I went, oh my. But by God's grace, I had the time to do this. And it was certainly his timing. So I was very excited when it came out. And the major reason why is because it's exactly the kind of thing that I've been involved in uh, since college in some way or another. I've been interested in integrating my faith with my love of God and my love of creation. That started in college. My dad's a pastor, so I grew up a Christian. And in college, I was trying to figure out what does that mean and how do I connect things. Um, and did some ministry kinds of things, just straight people ministry kinds of things, and enjoyed that. But there was something lacking, and the thing lacking was the rest of creation because that's how it's made. So, um, My bachelor's degree was in natural science, very broad, worked out great for environmental science because environmental science is, as you look through the book, you'll find out it's a little bit about everything. Um, and met my wife there. She got me really, really interested in birds. And that ended up culminating in a PhD in environmental studies. I got that PhD because I would have conversations with people that were not Christian, but were in the conservation world. And I got to the point where I said, "Oh yeah, yeah, I got the BS in natural science, and then I went to seminary. I had 3 years of Christian education, did a lot of Christian camping, ran a nature school, outdoor education school, that kind of thing. And as soon as I said seminary, the conservation secular folks said, "Oh, that's odd." I mean,
Yeah, like that's
they're
weird.
going, "Oh, like, oh, that's weird."
Hmm.
And so that was really the rationale for getting the PhD. I made sure that it was not a frou-frou PhD of, I think I'm going to talk to 12 people and see what they think about X issue and write it all up and hope I get a degree. There are folks who do that on really serious things, and I understand that. But for my purposes, I wanted it to be something that would create the opposite of oh. I wanted people to go, oh. And that's what happens when I tell them that I worked with an endangered species, scarlet macaws, in a foreign country, Belize, and it had to do with altitudinal migration and whether or not they follow their food as it changes in fruit ripeness through elevation as well. So, the seminary degree I just mentioned and briefly, that was important because I knew that I'd be in some sort of ministry. I didn't know what kind of ministry it was going to be, but that was a very a great experience, and I followed through on that as well. I'm currently a Mennonite pastor, and I don't have a congregation. I have a number of congregations in that I'm kind of the conference's eco pastor. So if folks have questions about environmental issues, they will often come to me. So yeah. So all that means this was right up my alley, and I was super excited to start on it. So I mentioned it to Karen, and she also got really excited about it. And then she figured out that she was going to end up reading all of it. So go ahead.
Yeah, I've been teaching biology, earth science, and environmental science for 20 plus years now at the lower division college level. I'm kind of the Ms. Frizzle of my campus, working with the non-science major students. And environmental science is such an interdisciplinary field, and I've been teaching environmental science for the last several years now. Anyway, I was also very interested in this. And then when it became more and more clear that this was just so beautifully God arranged right up Mark's alley, as Mark said, um, I figured out that he was going to ask me to read every single word that he writes anyway.
Yep.
And so if I was going to read every single word that he writes, I wanted more than and thank you to my wonderful wife who read every single word I wrote, dedication page. I wanted to be all in with it. And so it's been challenging and fun and beautiful to be able to work with Mark on this book. It was fun chasing down and interviewing people to pull together the creation caregiver features. It was fun figuring out about what to do with the, for example, features in
Like the
every
Loch Ness
chapter,
Monster.
like the credibility of the Loch Ness monster and other things as well. So So yeah, we're just so excited that after all that work, we actually have a volume to hold in our hands now, to get excited about and pitch to others.
Yeah. The other thing that I omitted, which I remembered as soon as she mentioned it, is I have taught environmental science. I was the director of Biola's environmental science program for 7 years. And that meant I taught pretty much everything that's in that book
Yeah.
every semester for 7 years. Uh, so to be able to do a deep dive in each of those chapters was really fun. Um, yeah,
So John, what
Yeah,
other?
there I was muting. I was trying to figure out how to unmute myself.
Okay.
Um, I editing the book, it was apparent that you had taught this material before. Because of the immediacy with which you were able to describe what you're describing, it was not written in a way that sounded like someone talking about things that they knew about but hadn't actually taught. Because if you've taught it, you know how to make things organized in a way that makes sense for a text, for a classroom, in a logical way that might not be there if you hadn't actually taught it. I was stunned by the amount of scientific literature that you cited in the original manuscript that you sent to me. It's so extensive. There's no way I could put all those citations in the text. And it's not a scientific paper, so we don't really need to have them in the text. But what I did, in order to preserve the hot links that were in there and make it easy for people to use this reference material, we just made an interactive PDF out of all of it. And it's many, many pages long. I forget how many, but
It's lots.
it is long.
it's extensive.
Yeah,
And so, of course, that's very nice to see, because every claim that you make in the book is substantiated by a research article in a mainstream journal somewhere that's peer-reviewed journal. So that was a nice thing that I didn't really expect. I thought, a lot of things that you'll say because of your own knowledge of the field, but you appeal in every paragraph to uh, published literature, and that can only be done with someone with a really deep background at research background,
Mhm.
scholarly background into this literature.
Mhm.
yeah,
And someone who's willing to take the time to dig in there and do the research required. Yeah.
yeah. My personal preference is all those citations are still there, but I realize that that's not the genre for textbooks. So
Oh, right. You mean they're in the paragraph itself, the footnote number.
absolutely, yeah. But
Yeah,
oh
that's
well,
not how textbooks go. That's the
I
difference
know, I know.
Right.
between texts and scientific papers. But anyway, we do have all the references available for people, and they are included. The PDF with all those is included in the digital resources package that we have available to accompany this text. So when you acquire the text, it's like all Novare texts. When you acquire the text, you can get the digital resources download with it, and there are, usually about 100 documents in there that you'll need for the class, uh, quizzes, tests, and so on. But in this case, this one book, we have the references document in there as well. I already see a question that I can just answer. One person says, what grade or age level can you apply this text? In our curriculum program, text is listed as one of the senior, for seniors. It could be any senior, but you could apply it at younger grades than that. It's just listed as a senior class in our program. Let me describe some of the other features of this text. Mark, you have a
Yeah, I want to add
comment?
one thing, and the reason why is because it's hot on our brains. We just came back from a conference in Denver with the American Scientific Affiliation, which is a big group of scientists that are Christians, and they come for fellowship and to sharpen their wits and intellect, and all of that. But we were talking to them because this book is designed to be good enough and meet all the AP standards. And if that's the case, it can also be used as an introduction to environmental science class in the university. Um, and people looked at the book and said, "Uh huh, yeah." So, uh, Classical Academic Press has focus on high school and under, which makes sense. And all of our experience is university. So I think we're going in two directions, hopefully, and it'll be widely used.
Yeah, well, I think us working together produced a book that could do that. Since my
Mhm.
experience is
Mhm.
primarily
Yeah.
teaching in the secondary school, I taught for 10 years in the college arena as well, but not in the sciences. I was teaching literature when I was, or math, statistics,
Hmm.
but not in the sciences. But you guys have an extensive amount of background teaching the sciences at the college level. So that meant that we had a lot of background that could apply to both. Um, Let me just go over a few of the features of the book. And after this, we can start turning to the questions. If you've got questions, I encourage you to write them into the Q&A box. It's that's where we're going to be looking to try to address questions. And there are 3 in there so far. So we can, I'm expecting that a lot of you have other questions that you would like us to address. So please go ahead and start typing those into the Q&A box while I'm talking here. This book has several really neat features, features that I really love. I knew, and Mark knew, and Karen knew at the very beginning that this book would need to contain a in-depth treatment of the theology of creation care. I've already mentioned, and everybody knows about the discord within the Christian community about climate and so on. And even not just climate, but the whole notion of the care for the earth and how that relates to passages from Genesis that talk about giving man dominion over the earth and the creatures and so on. And that has caused so much confusion over the years, or in our opinion, wrongheadedness. And so we wanted to put forward a real robust apologia for caring for the creation. It starts with the notion of God loves the creation. It's not about casting it away or burning it up or cursing it. It's about he loves it. He cherishes it. And we, as his stewards, should do the same. So that this chapter 2 contains, like, the first half of it is arguments for creation care that appeal to everyone, whether you're a believer or not. Things like, taking care of the species is critical so that we can have food and things like that. But then the last half of it tilts toward the theology side, and that's a pretty extensive treatment. It's not as extensive as some of the reference books, like the one by Douglas Moo and Jonathan Moo called Creation Care, a Biblical Theology of the Natural World. That is a whole book just on creation care, which we refer to, but our treatment is pretty robust, and so that's an exciting part of the book. Another aspect that is highlighted in the book is the fact, and Mark is the first one in our project to really articulate this. It makes sense after you hear it, but I hadn't really thought about it like this before. But all environmental issues are inherently political issues. Nothing can be done without involving politics. If we need laws to govern chemicals, if we need incentives for businesses to act well with respect to the environment, if we have huge problems that cannot be directly addressed by small associations or individuals, but need like a global or national effort, and on and on. For many reasons, every issue in environmental science is a political one. And that means that to really inform students about what's going on and what it's like to work in environmental science or environmental studies, you need to understand something about how the government is involved and how the politicians are involved. And those are two separate things. Like the government has all kinds of agencies, thousands of them, both at the national and state and city level, dealing with things like land use and streams and recycling, all kinds of things, right? Those are government matters. But then we also have actions taken by various politicians that are environmental in nature, such as our participation, for example, in the 2015 Paris Accords. So both of these sides of the political question need to be addressed in the text, and they are at rather some length. And I think this is a feature of the book, that the land chapter, for example, chapter 9, and the water chapter, chapter 10, both those chapters begin with a lengthy tour through the legislation and the governmental bureaus and organizations that bear on the topic. And so we get not only the history in terms of the history of legislation dating back to around 1900-ish, but also a discussion of which governmental organizations are involved in matters pertaining to the land or the water or so on. So this is a real feature of the book. Doesn't mean that students need to memorize the whole government organization chart. That would be distasteful. But they need to read through and see, okay, this is how the government is set up to deal with these questions, and these are the different organizations involved. And maybe questions in teaching in particular classrooms could dive in more deeply here or there, or there are a lot of possibilities in that respect. A third aspect of this, and this is something I wanted to highlight so that people would know, my goal was to add in this content about how environmental science is inherently political, but I wanted to do it in a way that was not political. I didn't want to embroil our text and classical academic press in political controversy itself. Now, of course, the text is very forthrightly embraces the almost universal consensus on climate change, for example, that it is happening and that it is human caused. Okay, so we had to take a position, but I didn't want to do that by naming names. So it took a little bit of creativity to structure the text that would describe the political climate without getting into specific naming or finger pointing. The only names that we mention are actually historical names from the early 20th century, around the time the forest system were getting started, the national park system were getting started, and things like that. So we don't name any names of living politicians or office holders, although the discussion at times makes it clear that certain political organizations in the United States were acting this way or that way. We just did it without naming names. So I was glad that we were able to pull off that sort of semi-neutral position, as neutral as we can get it. A couple of more things I'll say about the features of the book. Says there's a list of these in the teacher preface, but I mentioned previously about the frequency of ideas for how people can get involved. This is one of the really great things that Mark and Karen brought to the book, and it's manifested in a couple of different ways. One is that in different places, but typically at the end of a chapter, there will be a discussion about how students can get involved. What kind of things can you do? And these places, this happens in many chapters. And so there are lists of ideas. In some places, there are lists of organizations. The organizations go from government ones down to church ones, down to local stream care ones. So it's just like a smorgasbord of opportunities for people to get involved. I thought this is very appealing because students want to get involved. They are burdened about the environment. And this book, we hope, will give them something to put that, some place to put that burden. Of course, the burden belongs at the feet of Jesus and our God, who's in charge of the future of the planet, regardless of how men may mess it up or may correct their actions. So we put our hope in him, but we burdened ones need work to do to feel like we're doing something. And so that's a very prominent feature in the book. Then Karen mentioned the climate caregiver, the creation caregiver features. We have one of these in each chapter. So that means there are 11 of these articles. Each one features a person who's a believer in Jesus Christ, who has made a difference, who has already done great work with respect to creation care. And the articles describe this person, their background, their passion, and their work, and what they did, and in many cases, what their advice is for others who might also want to get involved. So these are very encouraging articles, usually about a page each. And they're just one of the lovely things about the text. There is also yeah, those are Karen's projects. She also did another set of features. In each chapter, there's a feature called For Example, and these aren't about creation care. They're about, environmental examples of what the text is talking about, like pollution from tires, automobile tires, and so on. So, or electric cars. All right. So these are just for example articles. She wrote those too. Those are both highlights that make the book pretty fascinating. One last thing I will say by way of features in the book, and that is that this book is very personal, way more personal than any text that Novare has produced so far. Even though I frequently use the first person when I'm writing a text and talking to students, because I'm referring to my experience in engineering or, whatever. This book goes way beyond that because the way the environment affects us is personal. There's a great deal that's personal about our engagement with God's world. Just for example, while we were writing the book, the population of the world topped 8 billion people. And all environmental science books and books on ecology, they all have sections on the human population and looking at different kinds of graphs that depict the human population and talking about trends in the population and so on. And our book contains those things too. But our book goes beyond that because of Mark and Karen's pastoral hearts. And they actually treat the subject of the population in terms of what do we Christians do who have been given a mandate to fill the earth and been given many places in scripture that encourage us to have a full quiver of children and so on. And how should we view our Christian families when the Earth's population is now topped 8 billion, and that many people think that this is a problem? And their treatment of that issue is lovely. It's faithful and encouraging all at the same time. And I had no idea myself, how can you pull this off? But they talk about their own families, their own family histories, the sizes of their families. So the book gets very personal. They also mention their personal experience putting things like solar panels on their house, or using an electric car, or replacing their gas stove with an induction electric stove, things like this. So their personal story comes up over and over again. Also, their research experience down in Belize, that comes up over and over again in chapters where different creatures are mentioned and different environmental issues are mentioned, that their experience in foreign countries comes up repeatedly. So it's a very personal book. So yes, it's technical. Yes, it has lots of data. Yes, it has thousands of scientific claims, but it's all contextualized in terms of how do we, as individuals in God's kingdom, how do we act, and how do we understand the problems that are before us, and how do we act? So it's just a really beautiful book, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out. And I should mention, Mark mentioned about 6 weeks per chapter. This is the fourth time that I've been through, or fifth, actually, the fifth time I've been through a text writing process with another author working together with me. And sometimes those experiences can be trying. It's my fault a lot of the time. The first one, when we did Earth Science, this was over 10 years ago, it hadn't occurred to me that just because I can write a book in 1 year doesn't mean that other people can't write a book in 1 year. People who have families with young children and full-time jobs and so on. So our first project, I had this contract that said we were going to have a book, a chapter a month, that kind of thing, but that didn't work out. And it took actually twice as much time to prepare the book. And I realized early this is my fault for putting a contract out here like this, when our author, Kevin Nelsted, there's no way he can keep up with this schedule. He's got other stuff to do. So based on that experience, I was more careful when we organized the contract with the McReynolds, but it was still an aggressive contract, even though they had more time to devote to it without children at home, and sort of, professional time available as well. Still, it's a ton of work to write a book this extensive, and to write a chapter in 6 weeks is an aggressive schedule. And to their credit, we pretty much stayed on schedule the whole time. Didn't we start in 2023 with the idea of publishing in 2025? I think that's the schedule. Or
I think Mark
23?
started writing in 22.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the
Like May, June of 22.
okay, so the contract organization was the previous year, 22.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And the idea that it would get published in 2025 was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, that felt like a million years away.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
like,
but see,
when is my kid going to graduate from high school? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's a long way out there. But
yeah, the thing is, the review process and all the editing and all the, final reviewing and everything takes pretty much a whole year. So the last year of the publication cycle all has to occur after the chapters are all written.
Mhm.
yeah.
So anyway, my hats off to you two for pulling that off. And now we have this beautiful new book, and all the resources and everything are all done. So
Yeah.
I would like to add just a couple of things here, because we just came from this ASA conference and talked about the book a lot with a number of different people. First of all, three of the creation caregivers were there, and that was very fun to be able to open up the book and say, "Look, Oscar, here's your page." Oscar Gonzalez on populations, Angela Cantola on endangered species, and Veronica Franz on ecology and animal behavior.
And she was like, oh, look,
Yeah.
there's my picture. I'm in the
well,
book.
how fun is that? That
So
is
that was
just
very fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, to actually be able to hang out for a bit with three of the creation caregivers. And the other thing I wanted to mention is something that we heard frequently that you had specifically said at some point, John, and we heard frequently comments from people that said, "Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful." You look through it, the cover, it's so beautiful. And I remember you saying early on that that was something that Novare, or maybe even the larger classical academic press, specifically sought books that were beautiful.
oh yeah,
You know, not just like, yeah, it's a boring textbook, but a book that you actually want to hold and look at and open. And so I wanted to, this is a good way to tell you, John, that we frequently get comments from people about that. So that's neat. Mission accomplished. Yeah.
yes, thank you. Well, that aesthetic question about textbooks was part of my textbook writing vision from the beginning, back in the 2000s, because most high school science books are just flat ugly. Some are abominably ugly, and some are just moderately ugly, but they're all like ugly. Um, and that a lot of them are over designed. Like there's too many graphic elements on one page, like over 20 different fonts and things. Some of them are designed to look like websites, but websites are not textbooks. Websites are intentionally designed to distract your attention with all the pop-ups and stuff. And a textbook shouldn't distract your attention. It should focus your attention on what you're reading. Some textbooks have a policy of including lots of pictures just to try to make science look cool. Girls on skateboards with lollipops and all kinds of junk like that. Well, in our text, I settled early on, like 16 years ago. No, the graphics are there to serve the text. If we need a graphic, we'll put it in. At any rate, designing a text to be read, designing it so it has a clean look, designing it so that the illustrations are as beautiful as possible, sticking with a consistent color palette so that the colors blend tastefully together, which means typically redrawing a lot of the graphics that you discover that you want to use, because these are all using different colors. So even if it's a free use graphic, you can't just use it because the colors are going to be usually really clashing with what else is in the book. So I would redraw all those graphics so that they would be using our colors, which means it's a lot more work, but you end up with a book that's beautiful. And that's been a part of our philosophy since the beginning. When Novare became part of Classical Academic Press in 2000, that aesthetic philosophy just took on a new, we had new capabilities, and those came about because Classical Academic Press, in the first year I was with them, hired a new designer who is also a very talented illustrator and painter. So he's not just a guy who designs book layouts. He's also a very talented artist in his own right. And his name is Bill Wiest. And he even has his own children's books that he's publishing. And anyway, he is the designer that has been working with me since that time, since 2000. So all the new books that we've produced since then, beginning with Life Science, I think was the first one that so the page layout, the page design was his concept. The last book I designed myself was General Biology. And we have a brand new edition of General Biology now, and Bill converted my old design into his new design. So it has taken on a new look. But anyway, all the new text since then, Bill has done a lot of the illustrations and certainly all the design itself. And he and I worked together to flesh out ideas. And he's the one that has come up with the new covers. Although on environmental science, we had this great, see, one of the things I hate is a cliche on a cover, and all the environmental science books, their covers they all pretty much look the same, and they're all a cliche, like a picture of a canyon or something. Anyway, we came up with a bunch of cover designs, and we started looking at them, sent them to the McReynolds to look at, and then Mark says, "Hey, how about a cover that shows some researchers, some scientists in a what'd you call it, a Zodiac boat? The kind of boat that you would be in if you were a researcher,
Yeah.
throttling your way over to your research site."
I
And
wanted some people in there.
yeah, not just a picture of the world, but people studying the world, since that's what
environmental science is. Yeah.
Right. So with that inspiration, we went looking for images and came up with a few really awesome ones. And so that one of them ended up becoming the cover for this book. And everybody loves the cover. It's just a really stunning image that is breathtaking. And so it makes you want to open the book and see what's inside.
And it wraps around to the back. That's very cool.
Yeah. Well, so I think it's time that we should switch over to addressing some of the questions. So I'll read through these, and then I'll hand off as many as I can to the McReynolds. And luckily, the first one is for them. Sylvia Chin asks, question for the McReynolds: having taught likely from a secular text before, was there a particular text that you had in mind as you wrote? How is your book similar or different from the text you've used before? I've talked about some of the unique features, but McReynolds, add to this question.
Yeah, I since I'm first-time author of an environmental science book, I wanted to make sure that I was not way out in left field or right field, and it was actually covering the things I needed to cover. The AP, and this was supposed to be an AP environmental science textbook. So the AP folks have a list of things that they think an AP class should have, so that students that take the test can do well on the test. So obviously those things needed to be in there. And then I gathered 5 or 6 different environmental science textbooks. And before I wrote my chapter on water, I would go read all of theirs and find out, what everyone else is saying. And it's not like I was trying to summarize what everybody else was saying, but I wanted to know what was out there so that I wasn't this, weirdo over here doing this weird thing over here. That is how other textbooks have influenced me in the writing.
Yeah, probably if you're like me, you probably encountered a lot of books that explain things in a way that you thought could be improved. I remember studying for writing the chemistry texts and thinking that so many of the explanations I saw in other books were lacking in one way or another, lacking in clarity, lacking in simplicity, lacking in forcefulness, personal applicability. I imagine you saw this yourself and
Oh
thought, well,
yeah.
we have a different vision for what our book is going to do with this topic right here.
Yeah, I mean, very often anything regarding values wasn't mentioned. Environmental ethics or a religious or Christian interest in this issue wasn't connected. Very often they weren't connected to issues of people as well, like how's this going to affect your neighbors? Those kinds of things. And sometimes they had some sort of practical things for students to do, but they were very general often. And I wanted to, you're right, John, there's numerous places where there's an opportunity, and students are encouraged or even exhorted to go out and do something because I didn't write the textbook, so folks just read it. I want them to do it. Yeah. So,
I've been aware in my teaching environmental science for several years. I've used a text. I can't remember the exact title. It's published by Pearson, by Richard Wright and Dorothy Bourse, who are both professors at Gordon College, whom I've chatted with, and I know are Christians. And their book does have more on sustainability and responsibility and those kinds of things in it, which reflects their Christian views. But it's a big standard environmental science text for a big standard secular publisher. And so it's been neat, as we often said at the conference this weekend. This textbook really fills a niche because it includes those big standard environmental science topics, but it includes a Christian perspective and a Christian framework, and it can be out front about that. It doesn't have to be there because you can see it there if you know it's there. It can be more infused throughout the whole text.
yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that's what makes this textbook unique. There are no other environmental science textbooks that have Christian faith infused all the way through it.
Okay. Well, thank you. Let's go back to the next question. The next one down is from Ryan Thompson. Have any universities picked it up yet? It may help get it approved with the College Board. Well, just let me speak to the College Board thing. Our context is classical Christian schools and homeschoolers. That's where Classical Academic Press and Novare Science, that's our primary market.
Mhm.
AP endorsements have not been a thing that we have sought after. What we have done is create, this would be, I guess, our third, possibly fourth, depending on how you want to count them, text that addresses all of the AP syllabus for that subject area so that people can use it for AP exam prep if they wish.
Mhm.
But we have not yet sought to have our book listed by the College Board as an approved text for use in an AP class. We've not done that for any book. That's got its own set of parameters that maybe we want to do or maybe we don't, but we haven't done it yet. So what we do is tell people the book covers all the topics. And if you want to use it as prep for the exam, it'll serve that purpose. But whether the school calls the course AP Environmental Science, which you can only do with approval by the College Board, which includes their approval of the text you're using, whether someone wants to go that route or not, that is not something that we have explored yet.
Mhm.
But the other question here, have any universities picked it up yet? It's probably too early to know the answer to that question, I would think.
Yeah. Well, mine has. I will be using it in my online environmental science class that starts next month. we did make really good connections recently. I know there were several Messiah people we talked to, Messiah University, in fact, which is actually near you in central Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
That comes to mind right off. But as someone else said, it's very often a long approval process for textbook adoption at the university level. I'm kind of lucky at my smaller school. I can kind of decide this is what I want, and I don't have a board hanging over me that has to approve what I choose. So I can just kind of say I'm doing this, and that's fine.
And what college is that where you're teaching now?
I teach at Hope International University, a small Christian college in Orange County, California. Yeah, not far from Disneyland. Right. That's always a big, people go, oh, yeah. 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 I've been there for 15 years. It's a great community. Yeah.
And the book just came out in June, so
Right.
it's going to be hard for folks to adopt it immediately.
Yeah.
Right, right.
What we were doing at ASA at this conference in Denver was saying, hey, it's out here,
Hmm.
because folks didn't know. So
The next question is, does the book include instruction on writing, including writing prompts similar to the free response questions that occur on environmental sciences in the AP exam? I actually don't know the answer to that because I don't know if you were looking at those when you were writing the end of chapter exercises. There's nothing in the text that specifically would constitute instruction on writing. And of course, I was not looking at suggested answers to free response questions when I wrote the answers to the questions in the sample answers document. I merely, to answer the questions that were in the end of chapter exercises, I just went to the passage where the author was discussing this and copied the text and put it in my answer, so that my suggested answer would be worded in the exact same words that the author used. I think that's the easiest way first. Rather than making up my own explanation for what Mark explained, which would use different language perhaps, I use Mark's own language, and then students will use their own language. But I didn't want to introduce another variable for them, like which is the best way to put it. So leave Mark's way of putting it as the sample. And so yes, I think our answer to this question is that the free response questions on the environmental sciences AP test was not a thing that we were tracking with when we were putting this book together. If you're going to do any AP test, you will want part of your practice regimen would include taking practice tests and then looking at all the published material available out there to prepare students, which includes written things and problem solving and the rest. So there's a whole domain of AP test prep that people have published to address, and that's not part of the basic text itself.
We do have a good, essentially in-house resource on AP Environmental Science in Scott Smithson, who's the author of the Apprentice's Companion to our main textbook, a longtime friend and colleague who grades the environmental science, the AP Environmental Science, APES they call it, who's a reader for APES every year, is one of the readers for AP Environmental Science. So he's a great resource on AP requirements and procedures and strategies. Yeah.
All right. There's only 2 questions left in the Q&A column. Now there are 3. So please add your questions. And so we'll keep going. We've got another 25 minutes or so that we can go. Ryan Thompson again asks, how did you come up with the M and S partisans? Do M and S have any meaning? Well,
that's on you, John.
Yeah, it is. This occurs in the chapter, I think it's the climate change chapter, where the differences between the 2 major political parties in America are pretty stark. And we wanted to highlight some of the things that were going on politically without naming names. So I made up those two designations just so that we could call them something other than what they're called in public, because like I said at the beginning, we didn't want to be political. I didn't want anybody coming at me going, well, who are you to call out, this particular person or party? He asks, do M&S have any meaning? Well, they do. There's a private code that I used to come up with those letters that probably no one's going to guess. So it doesn't have any meaning that matters. The only thing that matters is anybody who knows anything about the political situation in this country can read the text and figure out who M is and who S is. How I came up with those two letters doesn't really mean anything, although I did have a rubric I was using when I selected them. So Ryan again asks, do you know if anyone has got, oh no, oh yeah, this is a separate AP question. If anyone has gotten approval to call their course an AP course with any of your texts. I do not know the answer to that question. I did used to teach AP statistics in high school, and I understood that the protocol back then is you type up your syllabus and you name the text you want to use, and you send this to the College Board, and they will look at that, perhaps interact with you about it, and then approve or not approve the class. So I got the impression that the suggestion of what text to use comes from the teacher who's proposing. So that would mean people could propose our biology text or our chemistry text or this environmental science text and see what the AP board, the College Board has to say about that proposal. I do not know if anyone has ever done that. The AP thing doesn't come up as often as you might think in my dialogues with teachers, but I know some people have taken the AP test and have done well based on using our texts. That has been mentioned to me a few times. But about official AP course designation by the College Board, that I do not know. Another question from Mr. Thompson. I noticed the AP Unit 4 does not appear to have a correlative chapter in your book. It's about tectonics, soils, El Nino, La Nina. Is there a reason this is distributed within the text? And certainly those topics are all in there. I can remember the, soil texture triangle and the soil profile pictures. Those are all.
Those are in land management.
Which is chapter
tectonics.
9.
I'm not sure if tectonics is in there, but it's an earth science thing, really. I don't I don't recall seeing. Yeah, I mean it's an earth science geography kind of question, really.
Mhm.
It's not connected to anything to do with environmental science, other than in the ocean chapter, you should be able, if people are talking about seamounts or a trench or the mid-Atlantic rise or something like that, students should know those things.
Well, and the motion of the tectonic plates is mentioned in that section in the water
Mhm.
chapter when you're talking about what's going on at the trenches.
Yeah.
Land is being formed and where the hydrothermal vents are and the sea creatures who live near the hydrothermal vents. That does mention the tectonic motion that's giving rise to those activities down there.
So we did not slavishly follow the AP ideas at all. For example, that I think their last kind of category of things to cover was all the global issues. So extinctions, and biodiversity and climate change were all at the back end. And I was thinking that if I'm going to write a book, I don't want to write a book where those things are at the back end because
Yeah.
I know what happens to the last chapters in a textbook at the end of the semester. And I was not going to want that to happen to biodiversity and climate change and a couple other really big global kinds of things. So those got put in the appropriate place within the chapter. I
Yes, and that was
mean,
the
within the
smart.
book.
Mm-hmm.
That was the smart way to do it. Because I agree, biodiversity, you can't just leave that for the end of the book. I mean, this is a thing that comes up over and over in the text, actually. But you have a you have a place where you introduce it fairly early in the text, and highlight why it's such a critical issue. And but then it comes up again and again as we talk about agricultural practices and
In
other
land
things.
management, water management, and
Uh,
oceans, and a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of other things.
yeah. Um, Yeah, well, we've gone through all the questions that are posted. So unless someone has another question that they want to toss up here quickly, um,
Go for it. We are
oh,
open to answering
yeah,
your questions.
we'll hang on here for a second or two to see if anybody else is going to add a question to the Q&A column. Um, I'm going to emphasize a thing. Um, uh, let's see. I'm not sure what this new one that came up on the PDF list. I didn't see that question previously. The PDF list must be referring to the references, the citations list. If that's the case, that is in the digital resources package that's available to accompany this text. Okay, here's the question. Would like to pick your brain. John Mays mentioned Douglas Moo's book for a Christian classical school. Are there other primary sources from your PDF list that you would highly recommend Christian students to explore on the side? I've always meant to read Silent Spring, but wondering what others you might suggest. Well, the
I
references
can.
list is not a list of book recommendations. It's a list of the scholarly research literature that Mark and Karen used to prepare the text. That's what that PDF list is. So we don't, I don't think we included a list of treatments like Silent Spring, which we love. Although there are references early on to Aldo Leopold and his book, Sand County Almanac, I think is mentioned somewhere, and his chapter in there called A Land Ethic, which was a game changer for its time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there are references to some of these things that are scattered around in the text. I think Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, is also mentioned by name in the text, um, in the context of, was it the land chapter where we're talking about chemicals and so on, and maybe the super fund and the love canal
Mm-hmm.
saga and those things is probably mentioned in there.
Mm-hmm. Let me interject here. I did reply, I did type an answer to Sylvia with names of a few books that are really excellent on this subject. For the Beauty of the Earth by Stephen Buma Prediger is a real major one. A good chunk of our chapter 2 is based on his ideas, fully acknowledged. But for the Beauty of the Earth, Serve God and Save the Planet by Matthew Sleeth, I enjoy because it's so, the phrase that keeps coming to mind is so butt kicking, but maybe that's not scholarly enough for this webinar, so perhaps I need to apologize. But I love how bold he is about saying, hey, folks, this is happening. Go out and do something about it. I really like that because he's just so blunt. Cal DeWitt has written many fabulous things on creation care. Ed Brown, who founded Care for Creation, the nonprofit Care for Creation, also. So there are a great deal of things out there that are not only inspiring, but would be great to refer to students as well. You know, on this subject, another one that I would suggest that I've had my online environmental science students read for quite a while is just kind of a simple little book called Planted. And that's by Leah Costamo. She and her husband founded this fabulous Arasha Center in British Columbia. And Planted is lovely because it's very much here's how one person sought to live out and make her environmental convictions real. I mean, it's just the story of the development of the Arasha project in British Columbia and Leah Costamo and her family's. It's kind of their story, and it's a really beautiful, beautiful book. I like to have students just read it at the beginning of the course, and then at the end of the course, I ask them to analyze it. And that's a good approach to take because at the beginning of the course, you know, they would be kind of like, wow, this lady really takes this stuff seriously. And then by the end of the course, they kind of get it more. So just a little bit of pedagogy there, but that's another great book I'd suggest. Yeah.
Now, in terms of other reference or books that we've referenced in the text, there are a couple of locations that just occur to me where there are other books that are mentioned. Karen, you just mentioned Calvin DeWitt. He is the first of the creation caregiver people highlighted in those features, and in that feature are listed some of the books he has written. And so you can find some of his. I've read a couple of them, and they're short, and they're you can read them you know, in a weekend, and they're so on. I mean, he really writes a book that can get you excited in a short time. And so we like to encourage people to read his books. Another place is in the chapter where we discuss plastics, which is in the water chapter, chapter 10. And in that chapter, there are several books about plastics and the plastics problem. One of them is Life Without Plastic. One of them is, there are two or three that I remember referenced in there. So that's another place to look. Do either of you have an opinion about Silent Spring by Rachel Carson that you'd like to share? I mean, it's such a
It's classic.
iconic, classic text.
It is iconic.
Yeah. I don't know if I would have high school students read it, but if you're in environmental science, you have to know that it exists and what happened because of its publication.
Well, I read it a few years ago. I should have read it 40 years ago, but didn't.
Yeah.
I read it just a few years ago. I mean, it was published in the 60s, so it's 50, 60 years old. I think the story of what happened that led her to write that book is a really important story in the history of our use and abuse of the environment. And it's a great story about unintended consequences and about you know, what can happen if you don't know everything, which is always. And Marx mentions this, you know, over and over in the book, you know, like here's what can happen when you don't know everything and you think you have an idea and you go out and try it, and the next thing you know, all the eagles are dying. Or, you know, you want to get rid of the wolves in Yosemite, and then the next thing, you know, ecosystems are all out of control.
Collapsing.
So that book, it tells such an important story that I think I would recommend that people read it as early as they can. It's not very long, and it's not overly technical, but it's hugely illustrative. Ryan asked, okay, we have a few questions coming up here. Ryan, I've answered several of yours. I'm going to skip down and come back to that one. Joy Lynn Blake asks, what about films relative to the topic? Well, I think you mentioned in the book Bagot. Did you not mention the film Bagot?
I don't know if that's the title.
Is that the one where the plastic bag
That
blows?
Yeah.
there's one about it's a mockumentary
Yeah. Well, oh,
on the plastic bag.
oh, well, I can't remember if bag is mentioned in the text or not. I do remember I came across it and watched it while I was, working on this text. Um, if you if you search for that title, it's got an exclamation point after it, and it's two words: bag it with an exclamation point. That's the title. Um, there are a bunch of children's videos named Bag It, so you have to filter through those to find the one that's about plastic bags in the environment. But that film is superb. I really liked it.
Oh,
Katherine Johnson says, is the effect of farming practices on the environment addressed? Yes, extensively. Farming practices are highlighted in the chapter on land management. But yes, there's a whole section on alternative farming practices and the consequences for different types of practices. Yeah, that topic is addressed at great length. One more question is up here we haven't addressed yet. What's your favorite lab? Well, that's hard to answer. It's almost been a year since I've looked at the lab book. Can't even remember all the labs, but there are a lot of them that are fun, and there are a lot of them that are simple. So one of the strengths of the lab book is that many of the experiments take little to no equipment. They're simple things that you can do. I do like that there are a couple of labs that make use of water testing apparatus. And so that means students get involved in actual real testing of water to find out what's in it and to find out and to compare that to online information about water monitoring sites that have identified problems with water quality due to lack of organisms or other things in the water. So these things can be put together. And Mark does this also in the text. There are several places where students are told in the exercises. Of course, it's described in the text itself, but then it comes back to it in the exercises to go and find, these websites that are um, uh, looking at all the rivers and streams and so on in the United States and find the ones near you that are polluted, identify what's wrong with the water, when was it tested, where's the last place, nearest you where it was tested. I followed a lot of those instructions myself because I wanted to make sure all these websites were functioning and that as we were hoping they would, as we put it in the book. So every time I came one of these kind of questions, I went and did what Mark said. He said, go to this website, or maybe it was Karen who said it, but anyway, go to this website, find, like the Superfund site nearest you. And there are actually 4 Superfund sites in the area around where I live. I wasn't aware of any of them. And like 3 of them were older and have already been addressed with cleanup operations and so on. And there's a 4th one that is still being discussed. But that's pretty fascinating stuff. And it really makes it personal, really makes it your environment. Like where I live, there was a plant that was, doing chrome plating on car bumpers and dumping all their junk into the creek and that kind of stuff. It's very it's shocking to find those things out. So those explorations are really just wonderful ingredient in the book.
Yeah, I liked finding that kind of stuff, and to some extent, it's because of the internet and those kinds of things. But a lot of agencies have figured out, you know what? If I put this on a computer in an interactive way, the public can find out what's going on,
Mhm.
and it's super useful that way.
All right, we're coming down to the last 5 minutes of our time. So let me just hit on a couple of other things. I see a question, are these water testing tools easy to get for home classrooms? yes, I mean, homesciencetools.com has one, but it's limited. It's not as extensive. So we in uh, the lab book, the Apprentice's Companion for Environmental Science, has with it a teacher notes document, and which you can access from the product page, actually. So if you look that book up on the CAP website and see on the product page under the support tab, there's a PDF called Teacher Notes. And in those labs that use the water testing tools, there are various supplied places mentioned. And there's one, I like Home Science Tools. We use them a lot. But there's another organization that has a little more extensive water testing kit. It treats a few more things in their test kit that I don't remember the name of that company, but one could look there to see about those. I see one more comment here I wanted to mention. This is an important element in the book. Sylvia says she enjoyed our words on vegetarianism. That will be such a great discussion for students. I thought that section in the book was done so well, Mark and Karen, describing the burden on the planet of everybody just targeting this beef every day kind of diet, and then considering how this relates to what Christ might have done had he been here at this time. Christ himself multiplies the fish for people to eat and serves up a fish breakfast for his disciples on the beach after his resurrection. So, and he is eating the Pascha feast with his disciples too. So there's that. But there's also these new pressures. And I like the way you guys describe your response to this in the text, which is we voluntarily eat vegetarian in our own home. And we tell our friends that that's what we've chosen, so that when we are eating at other people's homes, they know us and they will serve food accordingly. But then if we happen to be somewhere else and someone serves hamburgers or something, then okay, there we are. We're going to eat a hamburger. But it's not a hard, fast rule. It's not a new ethical test that has to be used to kill other people who seem
Yeah,
to be less than you. And
yeah,
you
we
were
don't want it
very
to be a judgmental thing.
Yeah.
right. I love the way you treated it. And as a result of that treatment, I myself chose to do exactly what you're doing. I hadn't made that choice until I was reading this chapter and realizing just how well, there are two issues. One is the demand on the resources of the earth because of the big demand for meat. But then there's the ethical issue, which is also treated in the book, about how the animals are cared for while they're being raised. And that
Mhm.
story is a very horrific story.
Mhm.
And we have
Yep.
been remiss to let things get like that right
Mhm.
under our noses.
Mhm.
These chicken places and the cattle confinement lots, the
Mhm.
CAFOs is what you call them. Um, those are all described, and to me, it's motivating to. So my new policy is if I want to eat steak, I will find a farmer in my area who raises his own cattle and butchers them himself in a local way, so that I know these are not coming from a CAFO. These animals have not
Mhm.
been abused like that with their antibiotics and their confinement and their filth. They were raised in a loving way, a stewardship way,
Mhm.
in an ethically kind way, and that makes that meat acceptable to me.
Mhm. I
Uh,
just,
so
let me just briefly interrupt here. I just mentioned Leah Costamo's book, Planted. She says, I only eat meat from animals that had names.
uh,
In other words, animals that I knew
yeah,
that I knew were raised ethically. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Hey.
I like your whole treatment on vegetarianism and the way you talk about moving in that direction and distinguishing that from vegan and the different kinds of vegetarian, the ones who eat eggs, the ones who still drink milk, so on. So
Yeah.
there's a nice treatment of that whole issue, and it's all framed, I think, very well
But
according to
we
Christian.
try to do the same sort of thing with eating organic. And one of the things that comes up consistently when I talk with people about it is they've got the idea that if you eat organic, it might be better for you. But I turn that around and say, well, actually, it's better for the rest of creation, and especially better for the farmer and the farm workers, because
Yeah.
they're not having to mix the stuff. They're not having to spray the stuff. They're not having to get it off their clothes, off their hands, and all those kinds of things.
Bro, that reminds me, what was the name of that book? I read it when you first brought it up, but I can't remember. That little book uh, that was about um maybe I'll see it in my study here. It was about people workers and so on in other countries who were learning how to farm differently, and uh, it was changing their communities as a result.
Oh, that was in Africa. That was Farming God's Way, I think.
That doesn't sound like the title I had in mind. Farming.
That's the name of the program.
Oh, uh, I wish I could remember if just what, since we were talking about resources. I don't see it right at the moment. I thought there was a different one. Anyway, I think it is mentioned in the text. I think there is a reference to that book in the text. So sorry, you have to comb through 500 pages to find it, but I think it's in the land chapter, if I had to guess, chapter 9.
Okay.
We're at the hour and a half minute mark, a little couple of minutes past that. Maybe this would be a good time to invite Jay to come back and um, close this down.
Yes. Thank you so much, John. Thank you, Karen and Mark, for your discussion today. I know that it was enlightening for me, and I know it was enlightening for those who participated live. But the great thing is, if you weren't able to make it here on a Thursday afternoon, don't worry. This is recorded, and we'll be able to share it with all those folks that are going to watch this in the future. So thank you so much for joining us. And we will be sending you all a copy of this in an email that you used when you registered for this webinar. So thanks, and have a wonderful day from all of us here at Classical Academic Press.
Great.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Blessings.
Take
Yeah,
care.
Yes.
blessings.